Hello students, welcome to Rao's IAS. This is an initiative to discuss the preliminary question paper for UPSC Civil Service exams that has been conducted on 16th of June 2024. I would be discussing the question paper of set D that will have questions on environment and ecology. My particular task here is to talk about the discussions on environment and ecology, how has been the question paper and what are the possible answers. Now, prima facie, before I move on to the next discussion, I would like to give my own personal assessment that what has been the question paper about. Now, the question paper has been relatively easier than what we have seen last year. I feel that a student who has been maintaining a good command on current affairs and also the basics of ecology and environment should find it easy to answer majority of the questions. Although it still have surprised on some areas, like I personally feel that not a single question was asked from important international conventions, even from the issues related to climate change. It was widely ignored this time. And second assessment is that I was quite surprised to find questions related to NGOs initiatives. International NGOs, their questions were asked, which was a little bit of surprise from the context of environment ecology. Then when you talk about the subject here, what is the relevance? What is the relevance of this particular discussion particularly? See, when you talk about the importance of this discussion, one can easily understand that those students who have appeared this year in the prelims, they would find this discussion very fruitful. We have tried our level best to make sure that the discussion remains honest, authentic, and we give full-fledged arguments on finding the right answer. But secondly, the students who have not been able to appear this year, who are planning to appear in the future, they can get a very good hands-on experience regarding the pattern of examination UPSC follows, the kind of questions they quote, and also the ways, the methodology that we can follow to find out the right answer. So let's start, guys. Let's start with our discussion. So I'm following the set D. Now, our assessment shows that there are a total of 15 questions that have been asked on environment, out of which we have divided the questions on these 6 micro topics. Environmental pollution. From here, we can easily identify 3 questions which have been very straightforward. The difficulty level has also been somewhat moderate to easy, right? From climate change and global warming, we have found 2 questions have been asked. Again, the difficulty level is not very high because the kind of questions that have been asked, they are very much inspired from current affairs. Species and biodiversity. This is one topic which I normally, tell students not to divulge much more into, not to indulge more into. Although there have been 5 questions this time on species and biodiversity, I was personally hoping around 3 questions, but this time UPSC have surprised us by asking 5 questions. On ecosystem concepts, they have asked 2 questions on here, and which also seems to be very simple and straightforward. 2 questions have also been asked on international organizations. International organizations here are not the ones which are regularly discussed in ecology and environment. These are mostly the NGOs which have been there working in different countries. And 1 question has been asked on environmental laws in India, right? So this has been the total breakup of all the topics that have been asked. Let's start with question number 1. The first question that we are going to take is question number 62 according to the set D. I'm writing it again so that there is no confusion. So according to the set D, the first question is question number 62 that I'm going to take. Now the first statement here is many chewing gums found in the market are considered a source of environmental pollution. This is the statement 1. The statement 2 is many chewing gums contain plastic as a gum base. Now we have to find the correct statements here, statements out of the 2 based on the options given us here. Now, if I go with the answer straight away, let me tell you, chewing gums found in the market are considered as a source of environmental pollution. I hope you understand when you talk about environmental pollution, this has to be validated only when there is an environmental pollutant involved. I hope you all understand environmental pollutants are those substances which somewhat disturbs the quality or the nature of the environment. They could be solid in nature, they could be liquid, they could be gaseous. If they disturb the overall natural quality of the environment, then they can obviously be considered as environmental pollutant. So when you talk about environmental pollutants, we have to ensure whether chewing gums really contain any environmental pollutant. So let me tell you guys, yes, the chewing gums, they mostly use a petroleum plastic derivative called polyvinyl acetate. polyvinyl acetate is one of the petroleum plastic derivative which is used as the gum base of chewing gums. Now, of course, this technically does not, get sourced from our textbooks, but there has been a news related to these eco-friendly chewing gums or related to biodegradable chewing gums, which was even featured in the Shark Tank India program, quite recently. So it may be, sourced from those general understanding. So the question is, many chewing gums found in the market are considered as a source of environmental pollution. Yes, because they contain a petroleum-based plastic called polyvinyl acetate. Secondly, many chewing gums contain plastic as a gum base. Actually, this statement is also correct because this polyvinyl acetate behaves as a gum base for the chewing gums. So the answer to this question, if you look at the options, it says both statement 1 and statement 2 are correct. Yes, that's correct. Both statement 1 and 2 are correct. And statement 2 explains the statement 1 perfectly. Now, to conclude whether this is the answer, we'll try to read both statement 1 and 2, and we'll try to put the word because in between so that we can identify whether they can really, whether they are really, explaining whether statement 2 is really explaining the statement 1. So let's see, many chewing gums found in the market are considered as a source of environmental pollution because many chewing gums contain plastic as a gum base. I think this fits in perfectly. It clearly shows that option A seems to be the answer here, because yes, there is a plastic used as a gum base, and that makes the chewing gums as a potential environmental hazard or a source of environmental pollution. I hope all of you guys are able to understand. This is the first question here, right? So question number 62, the answer is A. I hope all of you understand. Then next is, consider the following pairs. Now here you can see on one side or in one of the rows we have got the countries mentioned, and in the other row we have got the animals found in its natural habitat. So they have mentioned Brazil and they have matched it with Indri. They have mentioned Indonesia, matched it with elk, and Madagascar matched it with bonobo. Now the question is, how many of these above pairs are correctly matched? Now this question is related to biodiversity and their respective habitats. Now, to answer such a question, the only way is you should be knowing about the geographical distribution and the major flora and fauna found in those geographical areas. Now, I'll straight away come to the explanation part of this particular question. If you talk about these three animals, I have basically taken the photographs of these three animals. This is our famous Indri. Indri is a type of a lemur. So if they would have used Indri lemur, it would have been somewhat easier for us to come down to an answer, because we all know that lemurs are very commonly found in Madagascar. This is the elk. Elk is probably the easiest keyword here, because elk is something which is very popularly showcased in a lot of Hollywood films which have been shot in Alaska, shot in Yellowstone National Park, or in the popular areas of North America. And then this is bonobo. If you guys have any interest in knowing about the various types of apes, then bonobo happens to be a variety of ape which is still a continuing ape variety found in Central Africa, right? So these are the three animals. Bonobo, like I said, it is popularly found in Central Africa. Elk, like I said, it is popularly found in North America. And the Indri lemur, it's a variety of a lemur. Lemurs are arboreals. Arboreals means they are found to be living on trees. This is a lemur that lives on trees. It's an arboreal lemur. And this Indri, so one can understand, its lemurs are popularly found in Madagascar. Elks are North America. And similarly, bonobo is in Africa. So one can easily understand this is incorrectly matched. Indonesia elk, again incorrectly matched, and Madagascar bonobo, again incorrectly matched. The answer seems to be D. None of them have been correctly matched. I hope all of you are able to understand. It's a completely straightforward question. The question paper has put up most of the questions which happens to be such straightforward, right? Now, my personal advice is, if you are unaware of any of these things, if you are not sure of the right answers here, I would tell you, I would highly recommend, in fact, that do not take any chances. Because if you take a lot of chance in answering questions like this, if you do a lot of guesswork, there is a high chance that you may you may commit a mistake here, and it will be costing a lot in the form of negative marks, right? So attempt only those questions, answer only those questions for which you are 100% confident, and then do an assessment whether you have a good chance of qualifying or not. Then let's go to the next slide. The next slide is, consider the following statements regarding the World Toilet Organization. Now, this question does not technically or does not fully instate as a question related to environment and ecology. It can more or less be considered equally important in social justice. In fact, because the word, it's the key word here is World Toilet Organization. The objective of World Toilet Organization is basically to achieve sanitation, humane conditions for sanitation, health and such areas. So it is somewhat overlaps with a little bit of environment, but more or less with social justice. Now let's see, it is one of the agencies of United Nations. Now let me quote very clearly, World Toilet Organization, it is an NGO of its own. It is not a part of United Nations. It is not a part of United Nations. Remember this. It's just an NGO. World Toilet Summit, World Toilet Day, World Toilet College are initiatives of this organization to inspire actions to tackle global sanitation crisis. Yes, that's absolutely correct. World Toilet College. In fact, we have got World Toilet Colleges built in India as well. These colleges' primary function or the primary focus is that they want to promote sanitation, knowledge about sanitation, importance of sanitation among the society, and mostly these organizations are very popular in developing and underdeveloped countries, because these are the areas where sanitation still happens to be one of the objectives that is yet to be achieved in good governance, right? The main focus of this function of its function is to grant funds to the least developed countries and developing countries to achieve the end of open defecation. Now, achieving end of open defecation, it's obviously an objective of this organization. It's an important part of clean sanitation habits. But the point here is, the keyword that you have to mark here is that the main focus of its function is to grant funds. Now, is the main function of this organization is to grant funds? Now, this is highly debatable. Grant funds, the funding part is not the criteria or not the work profile of WTO, World Toilet Organization. Of course, it can channelize grants from one organization to another, but its main focus is to basically promote the knowledge of clean sanitation system. It is not a financial organization that grants funds to developing or underdeveloped countries. I hope you understand. So this statement seems to be incorrect. So the answer here that fits in perfectly is option A, which is 2 only. 2 only seems to be the perfect answer here. And again, it's a very factual, very straightforward question related to international organizations. Then next is, consider the following statements. Number 1 is, lions do not have a particular breeding season. Second statement is, unlike most other big cats, cheetahs do not roar. I hope this is somewhat very much understood by most of you. And next is, unlike male lions, male leopards do not proclaim their territory by scent marking. All right. You must have noticed scent marking is something which is quite commonly observed in dogs. So we'll talk about this. Let us first start with this the first point. Now, lions do not have a particular breeding season. Tell me guys, do we have a breeding season for humans? Is there any breeding season for humans where humans breed more? Do we have any breeding seasons for cows and buffaloes? Do we have any breeding season for any higher mammal that we see around us? Elephants, for example. Mind my words, guys, when we talk about higher mammals, higher mammals are basically the mammals which are, apex predators, which are found very late, much later in the food chain. When you see higher mammals, these organisms are somewhat more adapted to the nearby ecosystem. Whichever ecosystem they have been found, they seem to be more adaptive. They can easily adapt in those conditions. Very conducively they can survive. So when their adaptation itself is very much conducive, when they have very well adapted to an ecosystem, it is somewhat easier for them to adapt in possibly any kind of condition throughout the year. So these animals are less likely to have a particular breeding season. And secondly, when you talk about apex predators, like for example, lion happens to be an apex predator. There is no animal that hunts on lion. You can use your common sense as well. Lion being an apex predator, there is no animal that hunts on lion. That means there is no specific season that lion may be waiting for to find a secure environment for breeding. I hope you understand, because there is no apex predator to lion. So one thing is very clear, that higher mammals and apex predators are less likely. Higher mammals and apex predators are less likely to have a breeding season. Less likely, I'm saying, right? They are less likely to have a breeding season. Of course, because the sense of safety, the sense of adaptability is much higher in these animals. And that's why they are less prone to get attacked by any animal during the breeding season. So they can breed anytime in the year. So that is why this statement seems to be correct. Statement number 1 seems to be correct. Statement number 2 says, unlike most other big cats, cheetahs do not roar. This also seems to be very clear. Cheetahs, you might have never heard a cheetah roar, right? So they also do not. This statement also seems to be very clear, very straightforward, a simple factual statement about cheetahs. And third point is, unlike male lions, male leopards do not proclaim their territory by scent marking. That's true that lions do not follow the scent marking, but male leopards, they actually do. They do proclaim their territories by scent marking. What is scent marking? Scent marking, you must have noticed that dogs, cats, they often use their body scent to mark their territories. You must be knowing that they basically, sprinkle urine, in different areas to mark their territories. Sometimes they scratch the surfaces to leave their scent. Sometimes they rub their faces on some surface to leave their scent. The similar kind of habit has been observed on leopards as well. Leopards often do mark territories, guys. They mark territories like trees. They mark territories because leopards can even climb up the trees. So leopards often mark trees. They mark other kinds of territories as well, right? So this statement seems to be incorrect, but the first and second statement seems to be absolutely correct. The answer that we can confirm here is A, 1 and 2 only. I hope you're able to understand. The answer is 1 and 2. Then next is, which one of the following is the correct description of 100 million farmers? Now this 100 million farmer has been an initiative from World Economic Forum, WEF. World Economic Forum, it is headquartered in Switzerland. It's again an international NGO. It is not a part of the United Nations. It is not a part of any global multilateral organization. It is an NGO based in Switzerland, World Economic Forum. Now, World Economic Forum started this initiative called 100 Million Farmers. Now, this initiative of World Economic Forum is somewhat in tandem or in relation to sustainable agriculture, in relation to climate change resilient agriculture. Now, this initiative is very important considering the importance of climate change, the importance of finding mitigation strategies to reverse the impact of climate change. So 100 Million Farmers is an initiative from World Economic Forum, and this initiative is particularly to help farmers adapt against climate change, to increase their resilience towards climate change, and also to invest to change their agriculture production in such a way, to use water and food resource in such a way so that the overall objective of becoming a net zero carbon emitting world can be realized. So when you look at these objectives, it's very appropriate that the statement number 1 is a platform for accelerating the transition towards food and water systems that are net zero. So producing that food which is having low carbon emissions, extracting water from the surface so that when you extract water from the ground, you are using some more energy source to extract this water. So using the water resource which happens to be carbon neutral, nature positive, and that aims to increase the farmers' resilience to climate change. So this clearly shows that statement number 1, it seems to be more appropriately framed in context with the description of 100 million farmers. When you look at the other statements, it's very clear that it is not a digital platform fully integrated to serve with service providers and built on blockchain that lets buyers, sellers, and third parties trade fertilizers quickly. I hope you understand trading fertilizers in India is basically, traded by Government of India. Fertilizers mostly are used for agriculture in India, and it is completely subsidized by the government. So government offers licenses for fertilizers in India. It's a platform with a mission to encourage farmers to form FPOs. No, it's not. This is not the part of the objective of 100 million farmers. Although FPOs are also catching up in promoting agro businesses in the country. It is an international alliance and a network of individuals and farming organizations interested in supporting and strengthening the development of organic animal husbandry. Organic animal husbandry, again, this is not the objective. So the answer is very clear. A. A seems to be the more appropriately framed sentence to describe 100 million farmers. A. Next is, which one of the following shows a unique relationship with an insect that has evolved with it, and that is the only insect that can pollinate this tree? I'll repeat, which one of the following shows a unique relationship? So there happens to be a relationship with an insect. So this relationship has to be with an insect only that has co-evolved with the tree, that has co-evolved, it has followed co-evolution. That means if the tree changes, if the tree evolves, the insect also will have to evolve simultaneously. And that is the only insect that can help pollinate this particular tree, this particular plant. So this is, thankfully, we have talked about this in our classes also. And if you can remember, in our class discussions, I must have told you wasp and figs. Wasp and figs. Wasp is a popular insect that basically practice something called oviposition. They help in the pollination of figs, but in this process of pollinating the figs, the wasp also leaves its eggs, its larvae, they grow inside the fig plant, inside the fig fruit. All of you know that fig is a popular fruit. So this image clearly shows that whenever the wasp is supposed to lay eggs, the wasp normally lay eggs around the fig tree. And once it lays the eggs inside the fig fruit. And these, as the fruit matures, the eggs, the larva, it often carries some of the pollens which helps the fruit to further undergo reproduction, undergo pollination, and then eventually create new seeds. But in this process, the fruit gets all the pollination done, and in this process, the larva of the wasp is able to grow easily inside the fig fruit. And once the larva is grown into a full-fledged insect, it flies out of the fig. And that is also the time when the fig fruit completely matures and it is ready for germination of the new fig tree. So a very good example, in fact this is actually a good question because it has been asked from the basics of ecosystem biotic interaction between species. And this becomes a mutualistic interaction because wasps are providing, they are basically helping in pollination. Actually, pollination should have been the right word. The wasps help in pollination, whereas the figs, they respond to wasp by oviposition, or you can call it by giving shelter to larva. They basically provide shelter to the larva. So they help in their growth of organisms, and wasp helps in pollination. So this becomes a very good example of a mutual symbiotic relation between wasp and fig. And other than this, no other, because it's a very straightforward question. So we know for sure that fig happens to be the answer here. So we can eliminate the other options because it's a straightforward question. The answer to this question is option A, fig. I hope all of you understand. Mahua, sandalwood and silk cotton, we haven't heard any such insect playing a role of coevolution as well as the only insect to pollinate it. I hope you understand. The answer is A, fig. Then the next question is, consider the following. We have butterflies, fish, frogs. How many of the above have poisonous species among them? How many of them happens to be poisonous species? Now, the answer to this question, of course, this question has been asked from species, their characteristics. Now, to answer such kind of questions, I normally suggest students that you please make sure that you have studied these things. Only when you are 100% confident, then only you should try to attempt answers like this. Now, I'm very sure even from the class discussion, you guys can easily guess that we have somewhat talked about these three species in the class, and this answer can easily be answered with the help of our class notes itself. But I'll still give you examples like frogs. You may be knowing dart frog of South America. Dart frogs of South America, if you can recall, I told you about something known as Mullerian mimicry as well. Mullerian mimicry, if you can recall, Mullerian mimicry happens to be an adaptation that we see among dart frogs of South America. And these dart frogs happens to be poisonous frogs. Why they are called dart frogs? Because traditionally their venom has been used to make darts for hunting animals and even, taking down humans, right, at the time of warfare. So dart frog is a good example of a frog which happens to be poisonous. When you talk about butterflies, there are many examples of butterflies which happens to be toxic in nature. There is one butterfly known as monarch butterfly. This has been widely discussed in the class and also, right, under the topic Batesian mimicry, right. Then you must have heard of other kinds of butterflies also, like there is a butterfly called swallowtail butterfly. One example is enough though, but other examples are swallowtail butterfly. Then there is another butterfly called Indian crow. You normally do not get a chance to talk about these things, but remember this for future. This can be asked. Indian crow is a butterfly which happens to be found in the lower Himalayas, and this is a poisonous butterfly. It's a toxic butterfly, right? So monarch, swallowtail, and Indian crow butterfly. Remember, Indian crow is a type of a butterfly, right? So these are examples of some toxic butterflies. When you talk about fishes, here, fish in particular, there are a lot of examples of fishes which happens to be venomous. One example that might have come up in the class also is puffer fish. Puffer fish is a good example. Then there are other examples also, lionfish, right? Some other examples are there, lionfish. There are some varieties of eels also which happens to be poisonous, right? Then there is an example of scorpion fish. Such examples are there which happens to be poisonous fish. So I think it's a good enough example and we can easily come down to the answer. Only when you are 100% confident, attempt these kind of questions. Otherwise, my recommendation is that it is better that you attempt questions from other subjects. If you are having a sliver of, doubt, it is better to avoid answering such questions. Okay. So the answer is very clear for this. Answer is all three. All three of them have some poisonous species, some poisonous variety. Then the next one is consider the following questions. Number one is cashew. Second is papaya. Third is red sanders. How many of the above trees are actually native to India? Now, this question is basically related to endemic species. Endemic species, again, a question related to species and biodiversity. Endemic species are those which are found in a particular area, only in a particular area, nowhere else. So, red sanders, this has been very widely asked previously also in the UPSC examination. And this is probably the third question that UPSC have asked on red sanders in the last 10 years. And red sanders happens to be one of the endemic species found only in India, right? Endemic variety of plant that is found only in India. So there is no doubt that red sand is definitely there. So red sanders to hai. But what about cashew and papaya? I can understand why UPS put up cashew in this discussion, because cashew was in news few months ago because the Konkani cashew has got a GI, and now Konkani cashew is one of the GIs of India. So it clearly shows that this is a variety of cashew which is found in India. But the question is, which of them is natively found in India? Is cashew native? Unfortunately, no. In fact, papaya itself is also not native. Both of them are basically originated from America. ये दोनों अमेरिका से originate हुए हैं. Both of them are basically tropical fruits, tropical ingredients found in North Central America, mostly in Central and South America. Central America से start हुआ है mostly, Central and South. These are the two crops which have been, two particular fruits which are commonly found in such areas, and when they have brought in India, they have been able to adapt easily with the Indian conditions. So the answer is very simple. 1 and 2 are not native to India. Only 3, the answer seems to be A, right? Only 1. Again, a very straightforward factual question. Answering question like this, again, I'll give you the same disclaimer. Do attempt these questions only when you have read and enough on these particular topics. I hope you are able to understand. Next is question number 676. One of the following regions has the world's largest tropical peatland, which holds about 3 years worth of global carbon emissions from fossil fuels, and the possible destruction of which can exert a detrimental effect on the global climate. Which one of the following denotes that region? Now, guys, again, it has been very much inspired from current affairs. This is a question related to climate change. One can easily understand because it is using the term global carbon emissions. And if destruction of this particular ecosystem occurs, then it can have a detrimental impact on the global climate. So there is no doubt that there is obviously an importance of any kind of river basin, because it is obviously a carbon stock. But considering the figures given in the question paper, that which holds 3 years worth of global carbon emissions. So out of these four, which particular you know river basin is basically equipped to have 3 years worth of global carbon emissions from fossil fuels? The answer is again a straightforward answer. The answer is Congo Basin. Congo Basin is the answer. This was actually news. It has been inspired from the current affairs only, and it has been rightly mentioned in the news itself that Congo Basin, it is important to protect the Congo Basin as an ecosystem, because any destruction of or complete destruction of this basin can lead to carbon emissions equivalent to 3 years of fossil fuels. So this is something which has been again asked from current affairs. I would again suggest, if you have read about this, although it has been very widely discussed in our DNS, in our different sources, even in the QIP it was discussed. So Congo Basin is the answer, right, for this particular question. Then the next question is with reference to perfluoroalkyl and perfluoroalkyl substances, which is also known as PFAS, that are used in making many consumer products. Consider the following statements. Perfluoroalkyl substances are found to be widespread in drinking water, food and food packaging materials. PFAS are not easily degraded in the environment, and persistent exposure to PFAS can lead to bioaccumulation in animal bodies. Now, I think you can easily come down to the answer of this question if I just tell you what is PFAS. Now, what if I tell you that PFAS is actually nothing but a type of microplastic? It is a type of a microplastic which is used in various bottling plants, which is used in various types of plastic components, and it is one of those microplastic which has actually made its way already into our food, in our food packaging materials, and also in drinking water. So I don't think I have to give any further explanation. Just to support on the argument, I'll say microplastics are basically those small microscopic plastic particles which happens to be so small that they can be accidentally easily enter into a food chain. We have already found microplastic remains in our blood. In fact, in certain news, they have also been found in the mother's milk. So there is no doubt that microplastic happens to be one of the major, agents of, one of the major problematic agents of environmental pollution. And when I say that it's a microplastic, I don't think I have to tell you that they are not easily degraded. Of course, they happens to be called famously as forever chemicals. They are non-biodegradable. So this point is obviously correct. And when you talk about the aspect of non-biodegradability and their small size, they are also more prone to bioaccumulate in the food chain. What is bioaccumulation, guys? Bioaccumulation is basically the point where any kind of pollutant, any type of pollutant enters into the food chain. So when any kind of pollutant enters into the food chain, we call this as bioaccumulation. So of course, the microplastics of PFAS are so small that they can easily settle on, or they can easily remain float in the oceans, right? From the oceans, they can easily settle on phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons are basically those floating mini or microscopic organisms, phytoplanktons. Now, from these phytoplanktons, once the microplastic settles on them, it can easily be transferred from phytoplanktons to zooplanktons. and from zooplankton they can easily enter into other types of fishes, or if humans are direct consumers of those fishes, then humans also. So of course this food chain will carry on, will keep on going until it reaches its apex predator. But one thing is clear, that yes, these microplastic can easily enter from here itself, and this is what is known as bioaccumulation, when the pollutants enters into the food chain, right? So yes, this also seems to be a correct statement. So the answer to this question is all three of them seems to be perfectly correct statements. The answer should be D, 1, 2 and 3. Again, it was not a very difficult question because PFAS have been there, in news. It has been there, popularly discussed in news, in terms of the possible microplastic pollution happening in our drinking water. Now moving on to this question number 78. Now this question number 78, it talks about some 5 organisms. These are carabid beetles, centipedes, flies, termites and wasp. And the question says, parasitoid species are found in how many of the above kind of organisms? Now students, parasitoid species are basically the species which can use an organism, which can use another organism as a host. Host for what? So parasitoid can use an organism as a host for egg laying. They can use it for laying its own eggs, for breeding its larva, or can host an organism for food and nutrition. These are primarily the reasons why parasitoid species, they infest over a given host. Now whenever these kind of questions are asked in UPSC exam, it is particularly very difficult for us to come down to a conclusive answer at the time of exam, because it is very obvious that these are general expressions written for species. There are multiple types of flies. In fact, when you talk about insects in general, we have the maximum biodiversity that we have ever recorded falling only in and under insects only. Insects, they occupy the biggest biodiversity. So it's very difficult for us to find a conclusive point which can disagree with the given facts, right? So when it comes to questions like these, when so many species are given and they are asking things about one specific relation, it is important that we understand each and every species. If you are confident in each and every species, then only we should attempt a question like this. So in this particular question, we have underwent a very long-term research. We underwent a research for almost, for almost multiple hours of research we have put into this, and to find conclusive points to reject any of them. But we have eventually found out that when it comes to these 5 species, carabid beetles, by the way, are the ground beetles, the beetles that are often found in the ground. Centipede, I hope all of you know, right? Flies, termites, wasps, they all are insects. So when it comes to these 5 species, we have found conclusive conclusive evidence that all these 5 species can support parasites. All these 5 species, they behave as host for parasites. They behave as host for parasites, right? And this basically gives us a conclusive answer that the answer to this question should be option D. All 5 should be the right answer. Now my suggestion for answering such question is, usually it is often difficult, guys. Usually it is often difficult to come up with a point which can disagree, right, with the given fact. So because there are so many varieties of centipedes itself, there are so many varieties of beetles, there are so many varieties of flies, termites and wasps. So UPSC, they have asked a question where they are themselves keeping up a very large scale open space. They have given us a very large scale of opinions where it would be much easier for us to accept that they all are host, but even more difficult for us to reject that one of them is not. I hope you can understand this. So the answer to this question is all 5. Option D happens to be the right answer. Now the next question that we have is on environmental laws. The Indian flying fox is placed under the vermin category in Wildlife Protection Act 1972. The question is in Wildlife Protection Act. Wildlife Protection Act 1972, right? There seems to be a little bit of, shuffling of words here. Statement number 2, the Indian flying fox feeds on the blood of other animals. Is it a blood sucking organism? Right? Sanguivores we call them, the organism that feed on blood of other organisms. We call them sanguivores. Now guys, let me quickly tell you what is an Indian flying fox. Indian flying fox is nothing but a bat which is commonly found in forest, in many forests of India. It is found in Arunachal Pradesh, it is found in Sundarbans. We have found this Indian flying fox in various forests of our country. It is nothing but a variety of bat, right? Indian flying fox. And if you remember any of our class discussions, I might have mentioned vermins. What are vermins, guys? Vermins are basically those organisms. They are those organisms which happens to be detrimental, which happens to be destructive to the human society, plants, animals. They can destroy any of the fields, all these things. They can carry diseases. So you might have heard a lot of rats, crow, pigeon, right? Pigeon, sorry. Then bats. These are animals which directly feed on, right? Bats, and then we have like things like nilgai, right? These are some of these animals which have been, they directly feed on fruits, they directly feed on agricultural fields, and they happen to destroy such things. So vermins, or they may even carry diseases. So vermins are particularly those organisms which happens to be carrying diseases or are considered to be dangerous or detrimental to the human establishment, human fields and such. So when it comes to this idea of the Indian flying fox, which is also a variety of bat, yes, it is being declared a vermin under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. It is talking about the old act. So under the old act, there was a specific schedule called Schedule 5, which basically had a list of vermin animals. So yes, it was a part of the vermins. It is one of the animals that can destroy, that can disturb the quality of forest, can eat up the fruits in agriculture, plantation fields, horticulture fields. Then point number 2 is the Indian flying fox feeds on blood of other organisms. If it is a vermin that can feed on fruits, अगर ये fruits पे feed कर रहा है, if it is feeding on fruits, on this ground it is a vermin. But if it is feeding on the blood of other animals, on what grounds we can call it a vermin in that case? Is it damaging humans in some way? Is it causing disease in some way? No. So it is very clear that statement number 2 really does not make any sense. In fact, let me tell you that in India, we do not have even a single bat that feeds on blood, that is a blood sucking organism, right? Bats are very rarely found to be blood sucking organism. There is only 1 or 2 variety of bats which have been found to do so, but largely bats are normally insect eating or fruit eating only. More normally insect and fruit eating, they are mammals like us only. So statement number 2 is obviously incorrect. And if statement number 2 is incorrect, even if you're not sure of knowing the statement number 1, agar aap statement number 1 nahi jante, even if you do not know whether statement number 1 is correct or not, and if you are sure, which is very obvious, that statement number 2, all of you may be knowing that it is not correct. So if you look at the options, only one of the statement is showing that statement number 2 is incorrect. Only one of the option has statement number 2 mentioning as incorrect. Otherwise, in all the other statements, statement number 2 seems to be correct. So one can easily say that even though this question does not apply in that particular frame, but still elimination method is working here. We can use the elimination method, and we know that statement number 2 is for sure incorrect. That means there is only one option that will fit into the argument, and that is option number C. Option C is the only argument or only possible solution to this particular question. Although factually it is absolutely correct. Bats happens to be one of the vermins, and they are often declared as a vermin under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. I hope all of you guys are able to understand. Now moving on to the next question. The next question talks about, this is question number 30 as per the set D. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, which one of the following is the largest source of sulfur dioxide emissions? Now, let me tell you guys, Environment Protection Agency is not in India, it is of the US. And US EPA has been very popular in giving a lot of information about pollution, about climate change, about polluting sources. So this is one of some of the reports of EPA have also been acknowledged by Government of India. So this question still happens to be a very valid and very easy question to answer because it's a straightforward question. So the question is, according to the EPA, which one of the following is the largest source of sulfur dioxide emissions? So when you look at these four sources of sulfur dioxide emissions, of course, sulfur dioxide is mostly released from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels happens to be the biggest source for sulfur dioxide emissions. So one can easily understand that fossil fuel is being used in locomotives. Fossil fuel is being used in ship linings. Fossil fuels are used in extraction of metals from ores. Yes, sulfur also happens to be one of the main constituent of many of the ores, right? We have to take out all the sulfur. And lastly, sulfur is also released in burning fossil fuels in a power plant. But out of these four areas, which contributes maximum sulfur dioxide emissions? So the answer to this question here is point number D. Out of all these four, I think this is very much commonsensical rather than factual, because one can easily understand that sulfur emissions of fossil fuels from power plants, sulfur emissions from fossil burning of power plants, this happens to be a much major source of fossil fuel sulfur emissions. The reason is because in power plants, the type of fuel that is mostly used is coal, and coal happens to be a popular reservoir of sulfur dioxide compared to the fuel that we use in locomotives, that is diesel and petrol. Petrol has almost negligible constituent of sulfur. Diesel tends to be rich in sulfur, but again, there is desulfurization that is often done for diesel, and we can remove the diesel, sulfur from the diesel. So technically, locomotives, they do produce sulfur, but not comparable to how much it is produced in power plants. So the answer to this question seems to be simple and very straightforward. Option D. This is the major source of sulfur emissions. Moving on to the next question, guys. Question number 46. This is a very recent current affair, in fact. In fact, in the last week of April, this news came, and that is on the Net Zero Industry Act of European Parliament of European Union. So there are two statements here. Statement number one quotes, the European Parliament approved the Net Zero Industry Act recently. And the statement number two says the European Union intends to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040 and therefore aims to develop all of its own clean technology by that time. So let's try to find the answer to this question. I hope many of you who have been studying, who have understood the idea of Paris Agreement and the objective of becoming net zero carbon emitter by 2050, one can easily understand and find out the right answer just by looking at the second statement. So the European Parliament approved the Net Zero Industry Act. Yes, that's true. It is absolutely correct. It was passed in April 2024, a very recent event. April 2024, European Parliament has approved the Net Zero Industry Act. Got it? So this is absolutely correct. But the second statement is the European Union intends to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040. Now, I hope you understand that all the initiatives that has been taken in order to become carbon neutral, they have been inspired or they have been somewhat sourced from the Paris Agreement. Now, the Paris Agreement that we have, it basically has an objective of making the world carbon neutral by 2050. 2050 is the time where the entire world is expected to become carbon neutral. And 2050 is the benchmark year that Paris Agreement is offered. You might have heard that India, under its Panchamrit commitment, have mentioned that we will become carbon neutral by 2070. But Paris Agreement still quotes that by 2050, the world should become carbon neutral. So when you look at this particular statement, the statement number one is absolutely correct. But the statement two, on this ground that it is expected to become carbon neutral by 2040, happens to be an incorrect statement. Only by 2050. In fact, European Union officially has quoted under their nationally determined contribution that they will become carbon neutral by 2050. Of course, they have an objective of developing their own clean technology, but all of its technology should be developed by them. No, again, that's not the case. They do have possibilities of importing clean technology from the other countries, but there are other mechanisms through which they will promote only those technologies which are cleaner in future, right? So the answer to this statement is, of course, statement number 1 is correct, but statement number 2 is wrong. So the answer is statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect. This is option C. Option C is the right answer. I hope all of you are able to understand. A very simple, straightforward question. And now let us look at the last question of our discussion. Now this question obviously overlaps with biology. Biology se overlap hai kafi. And this question can also be considered in biology, in science. In science also this question can be considered. I have considered this question in ecology just on the grounds because it is somewhat relatable to biodiversity. So the question is, the organisms like cicadas, frog hopper and pond skaters are, these are the 4 options. Now I believe this is something that all of you can easily understand. Pond skaters, they are also known as water striders. So let me show you some photographs. These are this particular organism. It is a very good example of surface tension. You can see how the surface tension of water is able to hold this animal, and this animal is able to float, able to stand comfortably on the water surface. It's called water strider, or also known as pond skater. Water strider. This is called the frog hopper. Why it is called the frog hopper? I hope you can notice it has a face resembling like a frog's face. This is called the frog hopper. It is also an insect. Just by looking at it, it is very clearly visible. It's an insect. And these are the cicadas. Cicadas, I hope you know, they have been popularly in news. These are insects that basically feed on fruits, leaves and such, and they are very popular in news. Often we see a lot of different types of arthropods or cicadas found in news, right? So these are the 3 types of organisms, and I hope just by looking at their images, I don't need to tell you in which category they would be falling. Of course, these are examples of different types of insects. I hope all of you are able to understand. This concludes our entire discussion on the questions that were asked in Prelims 2024 for environment and ecology. And I hope you found the discussion fruitful. Please let us know in the comment on what all other topics you need to know under the subject domain of ecology and environment. All the best, guys. Thank you.